Hey, welcome back to another fun Detroit City Sportscast. At the time of recording this we are just entering Labor Day weekend. And you're probably wondering what's with the interesting digs and surroundings. We'll get into that just because Mother Nature and the state of Michigan haven't exactly been getting off on the right page this weekend. But finally, before that, Adam, how are you? I know you've had an interesting week so far with whether weather and otherwise.
Yeah, it's been quite a week. And you'll notice too in the Michigan, because we actually recorded a college football preview for Michigan and Michigan State. Garrett, you were talking with a friend of yours, Chris Monroe, about Michigan State.
Yep.
I spoke with a friend of ours, Nick Finn, about Michigan, and you'll notice during the Michigan portion that we had to basically cut it into two different recordings because Nick ended up losing power halfway through our conversation, and this was before a bunch of just crazy fucking storms rolled into the Metro Detroit area and ended up knocking out power for me for an entire day. Actually ended up getting power yesterday at about 5:30. So and it went out at like 5:30 or so the previous day. And I'm in Plymouth and we got hit hard by these storms. I mean, trees down, just parts of Plymouth, just like a complete like war zone. Just like I said, trees and shit everywhere. I don't know how bad it got for you, Garrett, up in the Warren area, but yes, cell
Tuesday.
service was down, internet was down.
Yeah, so for me, Tuesday, I was driving early 6 o'clock because, there's two stopped at like the Del Taco by me in Hoover because for Tuesdays and Thursdays. And literally it was when like the sky started getting dark and the wind was coming in sideways and really pushing shit from out of the neighborhood across the road, the equivalent to like fast tumbleweeds out in the desert. And I thought for a moment maybe my car could go, is there a tornado? I'm looking for sun clouds. None of that happened here. The weather was good. I kept my power, but I've lived in this place going on 10 years and the unthinkable essentially happened. And my internet went out like just after midnight on Wednesday. And I just got the text back that the internet was back at my place probably this afternoon. And so as you can see here, due to being uncertainty for there, I'm at work right now recording this. Nice way to get into the holiday weekend because I took tomorrow off. But yeah, so it's been a really bit interesting. Like internet that's the most I've ever seen the internet down, but it wasn't just in Warren. You mentioned it. I think our friends in the Farmington and Xfinity just got destroyed basically in the Southeast Michigan area. So, which is funny that all of these storms that you don't expect much of do the most damage. And then the ones that you basically plant an underground silo for turn out to be just like, meh.
That's how it always is. Yeah.
So Adam kind of teased it on here. So what we're going to be doing is we did some pre-recordings. As you mentioned, for the Michigan segment with our dear friend Nick Finn and Michigan State with Chris Monroe. So you're going to basically be seeing those bits and pre-recordings here. And then after those, we're connecting right to basically provide what's been a brief note on what's been going on with the Tigers, the Red Wings. The Red Wings briefly as far as the TV stuff, but mainly the Tigers, the Lions, and Detroit City. So anything you wanted to add before we transition over to the college football preview?
No, other than I know I had a good conversation with Nick. I'm sure you had a great conversation with Chris. So
Yeah,
and I'm sure everybody will enjoy it.
yeah, absolutely. So grab whatever beverage or food that you want in, take yourselves in, and get ready for some fun. maybe some quirky humor. I don't know. I'm curious to see how much banter Nick had. Chris and I had some good back and forth like we usually do. So go ahead and take this all in, and we go from there.
All right. Hard to believe that the end of August is coming up. Hard to believe we are at football, in particular here, college football season. The weather is getting nice here, although it's going to be warm as fuck next week, unfortunately. So, but now we're here tonight. Time recording this a little after 7 Eastern, Tuesday, August 20th. We are 10 days away from the start of Michigan State's opening the 2024 college football season. To do that, we need to bring in people we know that are subject matter experts, people that not only watch their team and their university and alma maters, but bleed it. And the gentleman that we have here tonight is someone that I've met mainly not through the circles of Michigan State, but through our German club that we follow, soccer club we follow, Eintracht Frankfurt, Detroit City, and also diehard hockey nuts with the Wings and Talk Lions football. But most of all, I have the honor of calling him a great friend in life. Chris Monroe, welcome to the Detroit City Sportscast. How are you this evening?
That's a hell of an introduction. I don't know if I'm a subject matter expert, but I do appreciate always talking sports with you, no matter the sport, no matter the level. We've gone back and forth on many good topics. Some we agree on, some we're at total opposite ends of. So this is a new one for us. I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah. So I think before we kind of get you in, all of your family, for the most part, has a deep connection with Michigan State. Why don't you kind of for those checking this out for the first time, kind of fill us in all about your affinity with the green and white?
Sure. It's, you know what, it's kind of like being a Lions fan. It's never easy. All the teams I follow, from Eintracht Frankfurt, Michigan State, the Lions, the Red Wings now. It's something you don't pick. It's something that picks you. But I grew up in Lansing, in the capital city, spent my whole lifetime on that campus, it seems. But I met my wife there. My mom worked there for 45 years. We were married at the Alumni Chapel, my wife and I, in 2011. 2014, we went to the Rose Bowl, probably a once in a lifetime, the way things are going and the way that the bowl system has changed. I think my favorite Michigan State connection, though, when I was in the Army stationed in Germany, my wife worked for the Warrior Transition Unit that helps rehabilitate soldiers through injuries, and she worked in adaptive sports programming. And Michigan State was headed to Europe for a preseason basketball tournament, much like they're in Spain right now. They were in Italy at the time, and she ran the Warrior Transition Unit adaptive sport program in Italy. So she put together a Michigan State versus U.S. Army wheelchair basketball game. And that was 2015, August 2015. And I think the cool thing about that, talking to Tom Izzo afterwards, he got such a kick out of it because guys like Bryn Forbes and Denzel Valentine, guys that had good and long NBA careers, they'd never been anything but the best player on their team. And to play against them when things were all level, when they were in wheelchairs like us, it was a good demonstration of the sport. It humbled some of those guys, and it was a fun way to represent the green and white overseas, and to have them come where we lived was an incredible opportunity.
Absolutely. And to experience and bleed green and white, as I know your household does, it not only is there's great times, and there's also moments where it's not so great. So before we talk about the season that's coming up, we got to do a brief recap of the season that was last year. A season that I think, there was a lot of hope. I think the last couple of years on there, but a season that you were hoping for, unfortunately had some turmoil off the field, what I think is going to be the big talking point, as much, maybe more so at times, than the play itself. A 4-8 season for Michigan State, but really curtailed in early September, when Mel Tucker was put on leave and then let go at the end of September. A season that I know you guys were at the game at Spartan Stadium against Michigan. I know you and I had the talk. I think somebody at the production company that was running the trivia games decided to throw something in there, a question that were like, wait, what is this question? But it was, I think, a season of clouds and turmoil. Is there anything that you wanted to put out in what your thought of last season before, we kind of put it to bed and then get ready to talk about this coming season?
Actually, I'll put it in even more. I'm going to put it in even bigger terms. I think it goes back to even before the Mel Tucker stuff, the shooting on campus last February, February 13, 2023. Certainly the basketball program had the opportunity to unite, and that became a campus thing. My wife and I went up there the week after the shooting, paid our respects on campus, and ultimately that led to us moving back here, just that connection to the community that meant so much to us. But of course, like everywhere else in the Big Ten, there's no sport that compares to football. And getting that team together against Central Michigan that first night, there was no particular programming, no memorials related to that, but getting 75,000 people together, it felt right again. It was the right opportunity for everyone, and there was so much hope going into that season. The opener opened up well against Central Michigan. Connor Stallions had a great view from the sideline, of course. We won't dwell on that. That's for the other part of the show. But certainly, a 2-0 start, and then after the Richmond game, the ball drops on the Mel Tucker stuff, and all hell breaks loose. And one thing that my wife and I talked about before that game against Washington, who came in top 10, we know they ran down to the national title game. We were like, we have to be there, support the student athletes, be part of it. With everything that campus had been through, you just needed to be there. And for the way the season took a downturn, with the Tucker drama off the field, everyone was kind of cheering for Harlan Barnett, a Spartan alumnus, taking over as head coach on the interim, just to win a few games, to hold the program together. It didn't work out as well as we had hoped, but winning 2 of the last 4, and certainly at the end of the season, getting wins against Nebraska and then a trophy game against Indiana, both in comeback fashion. Not pretty. Nothing was pretty last season. Big blowout losses to the highly ranked teams, but the program survived. We'll talk about the better spot they're in now. The off the field stuff kind of took care of itself. Michigan State has never been good at the PR side of these things, as we talked about the scoreboard trivia thing and just very poor press conferences around the Mel Tucker stuff. And it turns out that the university was in the clear. They handled things properly, but PR is not their strong suit. And for how many times they step on their own toes, you'd think they'd figure out how to walk. But at this point in 2024, we still haven't.
So that season ends, and then shortly after that end of the season, I think it was Thanksgiving weekend where I think the initial announcement was done. Jonathan Smith, new head coach, coming from Oregon State, where a team that he was brought up the last couple of years. He had a 10-win season in 2022, was co-coach of the year in the Pac-12, 8-4 last year. How are you feeling about the move, and then as well as going into the season, what you've seen, whether it's been Jonathan Smith coming in, the coaching staff he's developed, any of the players incoming, whether it's through the portal or otherwise?
Yeah, Jonathan Smith was on my radar because I'm a college football junkie and I stay up way too late watching all those Pac-12 games, or RIP Pac-12 at this point. But
yeah.
So I was aware of what he was doing at Oregon State. And for those that don't know, it's really, really hard to win there. They have a single conference title since Lyndon Johnson was president. That came in 2000 when Jonathan Smith was a quarterback. I think his top receiver was Chad Ochocinco. Very random topic.
They had a good running back that I remember enjoying, but I forget his name. He tore it up.
I mean, I think Herm Edwards was the coach there. It was kind of a downtime in the Pac-12 as a whole. Oregon was good with a guy you might know, Joey Harrington, but that's right at the start of USC coming up, but Oregon State had their run, and Jonathan Smith as their quarterback, then coaching at his alma mater. Like, you dream for those scenarios, and for him to lift the program up to have 3 bowl wins or 3 bowl games the last 3 years, which is their most sustained success in a quarter century, speaks a lot to what he can do building a program. So there's some questions coming in this year. A part of the country he's never worked in, a program with some culture issues. So I think the luxury of getting him in November instead of waiting things out till January after the bowl season, he got a head start on fixing that culture, and he got a head start on figuring out his coaching staff and looking at the transfer portal. He brought over a lot of good talent. The obvious one being Aiden Childs. He was a freshman quarterback last year with Oregon State, played a few series every game, not very seasoned, but his athletic skills are off the charts. Brought over a great tight end, Jack Velling, who's on the Mackey Award watch list for top tight end. There's some good transfers there coming over, some guys that he trusts, both on the staffing side and on the player side. I think the thing looking at last year's team versus this year is meshing the talent. So we lost a lot of players in the portal, as is going to happen when you have that number of transfers going out after a coaching change. But you also have guys coming in, a lot from Oregon State, some from other places, including recruits. The first thing that Jonathan Smith had to do was try to hold on to the recruiting class Mel Tucker had tried to assemble and Harlan Barnett tried to keep intact. Probably the biggest one that will have an impact this year, I think, is Nick Marsh, freshman wide receiver from River Rouge High School, 4-star, 107th ranked recruit nationally, second in Michigan. Holding on to guys like that during a coaching change is tough. And in a skilled position, it's no secret you win on the lines. But that's where Jonathan Smith really worked the portal, was making sure that guys that were going to be starting on the line this year were bigger and more experienced, knowing he's going to have inexperienced quarterbacks, inexperienced receivers. He has a great running back in Nathan Carter, who missed some. He was injured a bit last year, missed a little bit, but certainly didn't have much of a line in front of him. And I think that's where this year, senior transfer center Tanner Miller, another Oregon State transfer, is going to keep that line a little bit stronger and a little more organized than they were last season.
So the season starts now 10 days as of the time of recording this, August 30th, Florida Atlantic coming in. You and I kind of mentioned a little bit what this is kind of a little bit of an interesting schedule. It's the first year with the old Pac-12 teams coming into the Big Ten. And it's something as I'm kind of seeing right now, you mentioned, it is a very split until the end of the season. It looks like every game for the most part is one weekend at home, the next weekend away until the final 2. So kind of some big matches. I'll name a couple of certain things in particular. So the season opener at against Florida Atlantic Friday night, August 30th. As tradition, Friday lately seems to be opening home night at Spartan Stadium. Big Ten opener at Maryland the following weekend on September the 7th. September 21st, you'll be in Boston, College, taking it on. Ohio State the following weekend coming to Spartan Stadium on September 28th. And then really I'm seeing right now, for me, off the top of my head, Oregon the following weekend on the road on October the 4th, and then October 26th, the trip to Ann Arbor and the reigning national champions. So I think I'll break this down into 3 parts. I think it's 3 parts that I have here. Matches that you're looking forward to, ones that you think are going to be pivotal to determine the season, and what are ones that you're not looking forward to?
So I'm not the kind of fan, as you know from all of my sports fandom, I'm not the kind of fan who just says we're going to go out and win all 12 games, 15 win national championship year. I'm a little bit more realistic. There's plenty of losses on this schedule. I'm going to skip over the big names because we're going to lose to Ohio State. We're going to lose at Oregon. We're going to lose at Michigan. There's just a talent gap there in a first year. If we surprise somebody, jump up and get a victory at Michigan or at Oregon, uh, all power to them. It will have been well earned, well deserved. But for me, I'm looking at everyone else who's saying this is a 4 or 5 win team. And I'm saying, where can we grind out those wins? What are the pivotal ones that can take this from another 4-8 to maybe a 6-6 or a 7-5? And you're building on progress for next season with some extra practices before bowl season. For me, that first matchup is September 7 at Maryland. A road game against a Big Ten team in week 2. I mean, Michigan doesn't leave the state of Michigan. They don't leave Ann Arbor, I think, until October. I mean, there's different methods that go into the scheduling. Every team has to play an early Big Ten game every couple years. That's just the way it works now with a 9-game season. I like opening up at Maryland in week 2 a lot better than I like going to Northwestern in week 1 a couple years ago. That
Right.
worked out well with the Kenneth Walker Here I Am performance. But going to Maryland in week 2, assuming we take care of Florida Atlantic, assuming we take care of Prairie View and A&M the following week, I think going at Maryland is a very good early season test. I don't expect us to win, but I think they can. Maryland is kind of in a transitional year right now. And if you can pick up a win at Maryland, come home and get rested against Prairie View, who you shouldn't have a problem with, then you turn around and go back to Boston. That's a lot of East Coast traveling the first month. But then you go back to Boston against a rebuilding Boston College team. Bill O'Brien, former Penn State guy, is their head coach now. And all of a sudden, if you have 2 road wins against Power 5 teams by the end of September, now you're talking a 4-0 start, and you can have Ohio State come in, and you're going to get obliterated. We're going to lose by 30. They're the best team in the country by a mile, I think. But you know what? When you're 4-0, you got nothing to lose with them coming in. We'll see what happens.
One thing I'll note also too with this new schedule, there's a couple things that I'm looking at and I'm kind of surprised at not seeing. The big one to me is no Penn State, because it seems like the last game of the regular season or next to the last game of the regular season, as I remember for many years as a child, going to now is Michigan State, Penn State, and also, and maybe I'm a little bit personal because I'm a MAC graduate, it's of Central Michigan. No MAC schools, no Michigan MAC teams. So what's your take, your personal take on maybe not having those kind of things we've been used to seeing on this year's schedule?
Yeah, to the first point about Penn State, that's one that I do miss. Last year, ending the season, it's kind of good. Before the season, they moved that finale to Ford Field, and right. They ended up getting 53,000 there, which I thought was reasonable given everyone knew it wasn't going to be a good game. But that beats the hell out of sitting in Spartan Stadium and watching a bad team lose to a good team when it's 20 degrees out and no one's in the stands. So it's tough to lose that. They play for the ugliest trophy in all of sports, the Land Grant Trophy. Objectively, the worst, ugliest trophy in all of sports. But that's one of those traditions that's tough. Land grant institutions, a lot of respect on and off the field. They've played some high profile games the last 20 years. And that's a tough pill to swallow with the expanded conference. You can only protect so many rivalries, and Penn State wanted to protect their matchup against Ohio State, and Ohio State had too many protections with Michigan and Penn State as well. So, it came down to keeping Michigan on the schedule, which is a no-brainer on both sides. As much as they think it's not a rivalry, it is. just remind them of how even things are since, we actually became a Big Ten school, and it makes their little head spin. But I think losing Penn State isn't as bad when you consider other games picked up. Having it in Oregon every year, UCLA and USC rotating through, Washington, of course. You lose a rivalry game, but you pick up other schools that you have a long history with. We played UCLA in Rose Bowls. We played USC in Rose Bowls. So it's not as if we're seeing teams that we're not familiar with, that we don't see on a weekly basis anyway.
And I think also too, when the first switch to East and West conferences or whatever, if I'm off on the division naming for the decade plus ago, Penn State wasn't the intra-division that was saved. It was Indiana, Michigan State.
Yeah.
And that seems like that's November 2nd at Spartan Stadium. But also, I think, how many years is it? I think it's been, a decade plus since Rutgers has been in the Big Ten. I think now that seems to be also something I'm seeing a Michigan State Rutgers thing. That's like the latest developing one. I think that's kind of been consistent. So that's in place of Penn State is Rutgers at home on November 30th to take it in. And then obviously, you got Purdue on November 22nd as well. So in your mind, I'll give you this is a 3-part. What do you think is a season record to obtain? A season record that would be, above expectation, and a season record that you think they're going to have?
So I think one that should be obtainable and should be the bare minimum standard is 6-6. We're playing 4 winnable games to start the year. If you have a hiccup at Maryland or at Boston College, you're still 3-1. You're halfway to your goal by the end of September, assuming a loss to Ohio State. And if you can't pull out 3 wins against Indiana, Illinois looks improved, but Purdue and Rutgers, if you can't win, even Iowa coming to East Lansing is usually one that we can pull off at home. If you can't win 6 games in this schedule, we got to reevaluate the direction. And that doesn't mean questioning Jonathan Smith. It just means the talent level won't be there. But based on the talent level transferring in and a couple of the key recruits joining the team, I think 6 is the minimum. For me, the likely is 7. I do think they're going to upset Iowa in East Lansing. Upset on paper because Iowa's got some votes coming in, but I think they're going to go to Boston College and win. I think they're going to win at Maryland. Actually, I think the trouble is going to be at home because Ohio State is going to obliterate us. We know what Oregon's going to do. But a couple of home games that are interesting, Purdue and Rutgers, the last 2 to end the year. Purdue should be a win, and I expect that. But Rutgers, if it's November 30th, as we're talking about with Penn State, if Rutgers comes in the Saturday after Thanksgiving and it's 30 degrees and snowing and we're sitting at 6-6 with a chance, or I'm sorry, at 5-6, a chance to go 6-6 to get to a bowl game, or we're 6-5 with a chance to go 7-5, how motivated are people going to be to show up for an average football game? So I think 7-5 is the most likely. The hopeful, the ceiling would be 8-4. There's just too many really high-end talents to try to pick another victory that would be unexpected. It would have to be at Oregon. And Oregon and Ohio State, I think, are the 2 best teams in the country here. Throw Georgia in the mix too, but 2 of the top 3 teams, and then include Michigan. You got 3 of the top 10 teams in a span of 4 or 5 weeks. That's a difficult stretch, and
right.
That's why I think 8-4 is the ceiling.
And I think I'm looking at what the East and West were last year in the Big Ten. Rutgers, while 3-6 in conference play, they went 7-6. They had a winning record, which is, normally we've been expecting for maybe the last decade or so them to be more near the bottom, like what Indiana was in the East and what Illinois was in the West. I mean, Illinois, despite going 3-6 in the West, Illinois was a win away from almost being bowl eligible, being not okay on the road, 3-4 at home. So that if that's, I know you said they stepped up, but there's a good chance to maybe take a road win there in the middle of November. So I think that'll all be interesting. Even Maryland went 8-5. So it's a good year, I think, to kind of see some battles. And I think you see like there's this like middle level. Can you be the upper part of that middle level? Or this is the first year you're identifying, like you said, Jonathan Smith's identifying, hey, what's working, what's not working, what do we got to do for 25 and onward? So
and to the point about Maryland, I was at that matchup last season at Spartan Stadium when Tulia Tagovailoa just destroyed Michigan State, put up like 600 yards. And I think maybe having Maryland in week 2, the first year without him, if they're still trying to work in a new system, if they haven't established a new quarterback pecking order yet, they might be right to steal a Big Ten win on the road that maybe it would be harder to get later in the year. So there's possible places to get steals along the way.
Absolutely. So, we'll be doing this this is the first time we have you on. It won't be the last time because we got college basketball eventually to preview down the line, and especially college hockey, which I know you are foaming out the mouth for. But before we do that, and ways let people know where they can fill you in, check you out online to get your takes on everything, Michigan State and other.
Yeah, my online presence will pick up here with the American college football starting, with the European soccer schedule revving up now. I'm on Twitter and all the platforms, actually, Twitter, Instagram, Peloton, if you want to ride with me, at C&the-D313. And of course, as you mentioned earlier, the Hey on Track Frankfurt podcast, where we're talking the greatest team in the Bundesliga and Eintracht Frankfurt, and all things Bundesliga, European football, the women's game. We cover a little bit of everything there, right?
Absolutely, and I think that'll be the fun part. That's at HEF Pod on Twitter, Eintracht Frankfurt, HEFPod, or is it HEFPod.com? Is that the website? HEFPod.com. And Eintracht Frankfurt on YouTube also, because I figured, what more else you can see my face on stuff. Chris, thank you much for this. It'll be an exciting season. Let's see what happens.
Yes, sir. Go green.
All right. We'll be taking a break in here, and then you'll go back and see what Adam and I do for whenever this does.
Welcome everybody to the Michigan preview portion of the Detroit City Sportscast. I am Adam Hernandez. Garrett isn't with me on this one, but I have Michigan sicko Nick Finn joining me to kind of cover the maize and blue portion of all of this. Nick, how are you doing today?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me. I'm excited to go over the season coming off a national championship. It's pretty great.
Yeah, big season. Obviously, last year Michigan winning their first national championship since what was it, 97 or 98?
97. 97 was the split. The Rose Bowl was in 98, but yeah, the 97 season was split with Nebraska.
Yep.
Michigan taking the AP, Nebraska taking the coaches. And first outright since I think like pre-World War II. Like,
yeah, so
I can't remember the exact year. I want to say like 48, but that could be wrong.
It's a little surprising too, considering all the success that Michigan has had.
It's Michigan in terms of I've been a Michigan fan since the day I was born. There's pictures of me in like little Michigan onesies. I have multiple family members who went to the school. I went to the school. Multiple cousins went to the school. We're a Michigan family through and through, save for a couple sad, embarrassing Spartans that are part of our family. Michigan family through and through. And Yeah, Michigan has always been the bridesmaid, never the bride. Like there are so many instances, so many years of my life. I mean, in any sport for Michigan, really, where Michigan is always the very, very good. They're an elite program. I'm not going to pretend like I don't have it very well as a Michigan fan, but yeah, always the bridesmaid, never the bride. 2006, they're probably still the second best team in the nation, even after losing to Ohio State that year in the game of the century. So many times that we've come up just like literal inches short, like in 2016 against Ohio State. Like we would be going to the college football playoff that year, have a decent chance. And yeah, so it feels really good to finally have that like cathartic release. And actually like get to the mountaintop. You know what I mean? Like so many times, like even against TCU, no one picked us to lose against TCU of all schools.
Mm-hmm.
And we did, because that's what Michigan does. Like that's just the story of sports at U of M in a lot of ways. So yeah, it was very nice. Very happy.
No, I understand it. I mean, I know you're a Red Wing fan. I'm a Red Wing fan, and
Mhm.
obviously living through the the early '90s. And I know you don't remember that a whole lot since you're.
I was not alive for the early 90s runs.
Yeah, you weren't alive then, but I can certainly remember, all the heartache dealing with those early '90s and mid '90s Red Wings
Yeah.
teams. But
even
then
after
finally,
that, even between 98 and 2002, so many of like, well, we have the best team in the league. Can we actually win it all? You know what I mean? It's crazy. I mean, in general, we can extrapolate to Detroit sports, period.
yeah,
Because I think that's very much the story of Detroit sports, and I think especially Michigan football. You could say Michigan State too, but I feel like they've even had a little more success nationally, which pains me to say. In like basketball and stuff like that, to grant them a title of like a very winning program for what they are. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like, yeah, man. Even like the other teams I pick like for fun always are just like number two. That's my lot in life, and that's fine.
You've got to just massively suffer through the bad before you can experience any amount of good.
But it makes the good so much sweeter.
It does. No, it does. And I was, thinking about this the other day that, as much as, because I was like sitting there thinking that as much as as much as I love sports, I hate it equally as much because the suffering and everything that you go through just sucks so much. But once you finally win, it does.
Mhm.
It makes it all. It makes it all.
It makes it all better. It makes it
it.
totally worth it. You forget about all the suffering forever. I could,
Until-
and we can get into this with Michigan stuff, but like, yeah, this season cured so many ailments. Like it's unbelievable. The last 3 years have been a magical run.
Until the next season rolls around.
Until the next season rolls around, I'm equally actually I'll talk about this, but my sort of concluding arc on this season as a preview, spoiler alert, is that this season's gravy, man. Like, who gives a shit? I don't know.
And that's great. As long as fans can, enjoy it for a little bit longer than just the immediate aftermath. Because this year, there's a lot of change in college football.
Yeah.
There's a lot of change in college football. There's a lot of change in the Big Ten. I mean, this is actually great for Michigan. College football expands to a 12-team playoff.
Yeah.
And I personally think Michigan is a shoo-in for that 12-team playoff. Now, hey.
Sure.
As far as the Big Ten goes, there's a lot of change within the Big Ten. You've got 4 new teams coming in. You've got, at the expense of the death of the Pac-12, you've got USC, UCLA, Washington, and Oregon. 3 of those 4 teams are probably going to be making an immediate impact on the Big Ten this year. And USC, Oregon, and Washington. Oregon is being picked by some people to win the Big Ten in their first season in the conference. And this isn't like them going out and getting Nebraska or Rutgers or Maryland. I think you've got 3 legitimate teams coming into the Big Ten this year that, like I said, could play a significant role on the conference this year. You've got 5 new head coaches coming into the fold as well, including Sharon Moore in Michigan, taking over for Jim Harbaugh. For Michigan in and of itself, like I said, you've got Sharon Moore taking over. You also have 13 different players who departed via the NFL draft this past year, which set a record for Michigan as a school. I believe the previous mark for them was 11. This year they are 13. They had 13 players exit via the draft.
And I believe they tied the overall record too, with most players drafted. I think Georgia had 13 players a couple years ago, if I'm correct. I'm looking it up now. But yeah, it was an unbelievable year. I mean, we're national champions. There's a lot of good players on the team.
Oh yeah, definitely.
And a lot of senior players.
Yeah, and you're always going to have that. You're always going to have that turnover. Whenever you have a good team, you're always going to have that turnover. So that's not something that comes as a surprise. You also have you also have a few players that left via the transfer portal. But going back to those players that left, those 13 total players that left, one of those obviously was J.J. McCarthy's, which sets up a quarterback battle this offseason, heading into the first game of the year. So Nick, when we were kind of outlining this, I was going to pose the question to you: why Michigan will succeed, why they won't succeed. Starting out why they won't succeed this year. Is it going to be because of the turnover they had, especially on offense? You had basically that entire offensive line leave this past offseason. JJ McCarthy, who is gone, Blake Corum, who is gone. Why won't Michigan succeed this year in 2024?
First, I would like to make a correction. It wasn't a record. Georgia had 15 in 2022. And there were a couple schools with 14, but very close. And a couple of Michigan players were picked up. It's 13 and 15. It's a ridiculous amount. Like it's just truly insane. But regardless, great numbers overall. And yeah, that goes to say that is going to be a big hurdle to overcome for Michigan this year. Like you said, losing the entire offensive line, losing the offensive powerhouses of like JJ McCarthy, Roman Wilson. We lost Corum. Like there's a lot of power behind that offense that helped. Those 3 are the focus of the biggest plays of the season, minus a couple. There's a very specific couple plays of someone who returned in Donovan Edwards that are the most memorable of the season. And that's a big hurdle. That is a big hurdle. And Michigan's offense is going to take a step back, and that's okay. Michigan is not ever. It's never been a sexy college football team, and it has just never been the Ohio States, the LSUs, the Alabamas, where even the Oklahomas, where you're dropping 50 points a game, no matter who you're playing. And that's how you're going to win. And it's going to come down to, can you hold the other team to under 45, and that's why I think a lot of the best teams that have won championships, Alabama, Georgia, have very strong defenses, but very good offenses. And I think even Michigan last year played to their strengths. We didn't have an elite offense. We didn't have an elite wide receiver core. We weren't even the best in the Big Ten in probably either of those categories. But playing to your strengths and knowing what you can do will take you a long way. Now, this year, like you said, there's sort of a QB. It's up in the air. The 2 big choices are Orji and Tuttle. Tuttle got a few snaps in last year, couple runs, couple passes. Orgy was mostly the backup quarterback to JJ, and was only coming in for like option plays. I think based on everything I've read, I don't have any insider information, unfortunately, which would be cool. Hit me up if anyone's listening. And Orgy is probably going to be the starter. I hesitate to make a guess on how good he's going to be. He's basically had one pass in 2 years in a real game. We haven't needed him, which is good. We kept JJ healthy for 2 years, and Cade before that. Like, that was a giant hurdle to clear and be successful. I think, especially like you were talking about the modern age of college football, backup quarterbacks aren't sticking around anymore. There's, I think, in most teams, a pretty decent gap between their starter and their second. If their second's not a like true freshman or redshirt freshman. It's just the nature of the sport now. You have to have a consistent starter ready to go, because then the backup, if they're not playing, like Cade McNamara, they're just going to leave. They're going to leave and find a place that they can play. And it makes sense. I don't fault them for it, but it's the nature of the sport. So QB is a big question. Offensive line, losing all the starters. Grant Newsom's taking over. Former Michigan player Grant Newsom is taking over the coaching responsibilities from Sharon. It's a big change. It's again, experience. I think in college football right now, I think the COVID years and all the exceptions have sort of skewed it. Experience is what wins championships right now in college football until it resets, until there's sort of the return of like the 3 to 4 year players. Having 5 years in college football is a huge advantage, and Michigan took advantage of that. That being said, it's still a big change. It's still a big change to put a full new offensive line out there. That's another hurdle. Third, I think, big hurdle is the wide receiver room. It's not very strong. We have like Samaj Morgan, and like Amarion Walker as kind of the go-tos. Like I can't even like pick a second. Like Tyler Morris will probably have a good, or hopefully have a good year. He had a good Rose Bowl, but like there's not depth in the wide receiver room. They're middle of the pack in Big Ten in wide receivers. Especially when you're playing against teams like Oregon and Ohio State that have elite, like multiple NFL wide receivers on the team. It's a big hurdle to climb. So that's the offense is a lot of the reason I think Michigan, quote unquote, won't succeed this year.
And it's that experience on the offense that is going to contribute to that. Not that they're bad players.
Not that they're bad. Before I get too doom and gloom, like I said previously, Michigan's never been a sexy offensive team. That's not their mantra. It never has been. The best like offensive players before this like last 3 years of like JJ and all this stuff were like Mario Manningham and Chad Henne. Like we don't have like giant offensive weapons, coming in and like laying down the hurt. Like Tom Brady, the greatest NFL quarterback, wasn't an offensive weapon at Michigan. He was like an average middle of the pack QB.
He wasn't even the guy at Michigan.
No, he wasn't even the guy. Right, exactly. Like Michigan just never has sexy offenses. It's just not a thing. We're going to drop 35 points on you pretty consistently every game, no matter what, but it's going to be a slog. It's going to be in the trenches, and for better or for worse, that's where you win games. So it's how it goes. And I think having Grant Newsom take over the offensive line duties from Sharon being the head coach, he's not letting his literal multiple award-winning offensive line history go to the wayside. It's not happening. I'm telling you right now, it's never going to happen.
No,
He will
No, I
always
was
have an
gonna s-
offensive line. He will always have an elite offensive line.
and that's huge too with all of this when you're talking about a team that is inexperienced on offense.
Mm-hmm.
Maintaining that one constant during
Mm-hmm.
all of that in your head coach and Sharon Moore is going to be huge for this team moving
Yeah.
forward. You're not replacing that. That same guy is still there. And he's proven to be successful. For all that time that Jim Harbaugh was out last year, Sharon Moore stepped in and did a phenomenal job to kind of block out all of the distractions and everything like that Harbaugh caused
Mm-hmm.
in some extent. And a lot of people are going to be talking about, and I'm sure a lot of people are already talking about, the loss of Jim Harbaugh. I don't think last year's team won because of Jim Harbaugh.
I agree 100%.
I think
Yeah, if I think Michigan fans are out there and they're feeling similar optimism. I don't know too many who are like super pained to lose Harbaugh. Like, it sucks. He's a Hall of Fame. He could probably win a Super Bowl. He probably will before he retires because he's insane. Even if he has to coach to like 90 years old, I think he's just gonna be in the NFL until he wins a Super Bowl. I think he will die in the chair, so to speak, or literally. I don't know. Maybe he's an insane person. That being said, and I've said this to a lot of friends, a lot of family talking about Michigan football, I think Michigan football's future is better off with Sharon Moore than Jim Harbaugh.
I agree. I agree. And I think that Harbaugh's personality was perfect for college.
Yes.
I think it works in college, but given everything that happened last year, and I know we're kind of getting away from it a little bit, but I just think that they won. They didn't win because, like I said, they didn't win because of Harbaugh. Sharon Moore came in there and won 5 games for him.
4, but yeah.
Four games last year, which is a significant amount. It's a significant
And
amount.
it's 4 games against 2 of our biggest rivals.
Exactly.
I mean,
Exactly.
2 of the biggest, best teams that Sharon coached against, we won. And he had a great game plan. And you can say, like, oh, Harbaugh was still coaching during the week and all that. Absolutely. You have to execute the plan. And then the plan never goes to plan. It just doesn't happen. In
No.
college football, especially against big teams like Penn State and Ohio State, it doesn't happen. And the moment I go back to constantly is the Penn State game. The Penn State game was the moment I sort of realized I think they can win the championship. I think as long as we beat Ohio State and make the playoff, I think we win it. Like, I was skeptical up until that moment. Again, as we talked about, Michigan always the bridesmaid, never the bride. Skeptical up until that moment. Things had to go perfectly. This was the one year it had to be done, or it wasn't going to happen for potentially, who knows. It had to be this year. And the Penn State game was the first road test. We had a week schedule before that. We weren't, we were supposed to blow out basically every team up until that point. And as long as we didn't trip over our own 2 feet, we were going to be fine going into Penn State away in basically a whiteout, not a nighttime whiteout, but basically a whiteout. It's going to be a big test. And then the Stallions allegations dropped.
Yeah.
On the flight over, and they suspend Harbaugh on the flight to Happy Valley. Problem 1. The flares are going up. He's suspended the rest of the season. Sharon's going to take the head coaching the gig. That's fine. Number 2, we could not get our passing game going at all. We had no pass protection. Our wide receivers couldn't get open. Flare 2 goes up. This is the time. This is the loss. This is what ruins the season. And Sharon Moore, this cannot be planned ahead of time. This, no matter what you did during the week with Harbaugh at the helm, cannot be what you were dealing with in quarter 2 of the Michigan-Penn State game. Michigan then ran it the rest of the game and won. And like convincingly won. Like not like, oh, they just ran it and barely squeaked it out. No, it's like We bullied the hell out of Penn State. They looked like
On the road.
amateurs on the field, and we took them back to 1905. It was just a bully ball game, and we destroyed them. And it was, I mean, destroyed in a sense of like, it was clear Michigan Penn State could not beat Michigan's defense. So Michigan's route was, well, aren't getting pass protection. We have two of the best running backs in college football and the best offensive line in college football. We're just going to play to our strengths and win the game. Who gives a shit how it's done? It's not pretty. It's not sexy, but it's a win. A win's a win. And from that moment on, it was like, oh, Sharon's the next head coach. Of course he is. Of course he is. Like that is an adjustment. That's such a ballsy adjustment in the middle of a top 10 matchup away to make of like, hey guys, I know we're coming out at halftime. I know your coach isn't here. I know you've gone through a ton of emotional turmoil and you're like 18 to 21 year olds. We're not going to pass the ball and we're going to win the fucking game. That's an insane thing to do.
It is. And like you mentioned too, I mean, it's a great point. I mean, Michigan on that flight didn't know that Harbaugh wasn't going to be a part of that game.
Right.
And that's, and to throw a wrench into all of that is, and being able to insert Sharon Moore into that and still come out on top in one of the hardest places to play in all of college football in Happy Valley.
Yeah, bar none.
It's not like you're going to it's not like you're going to Ohio, or some other MAC, school or anything like that. You're going into Happy Valley to play a rivalry game that is going to determine, because those types of games determine who wins the Big Ten.
Yeah.
And to go in there and just, railroad Penn State, it's huge. And one other thing before we move on, Nick, you mentioned Michigan's offense as never being sexy. And I agree, because when they try to get sexy, it leads to disaster, because I remember the Appalachian State game.
Yeah.
I remember that loss. And it was obviously the end of the Lloyd era. And and the whole thing was Michigan fans being just bored of the boring football that Michigan implemented.
Yeah.
So what did they do? They went out and they tried to implement the spread offense. And they went and they tried to go and they went and got Rich Rodriguez, and they tried to get, they tried to implement Tate Forcier into it. And it was an utter disaster. And again, like you said, that's not something that Michigan does. And I think Michigan fans have a whole new appreciation for offenses that are no longer sexy. They just go out there and get the job done. So I applaud Michigan for not utilizing sexy offenses, because when you try to deviate too far from what you're known for, it just doesn't work. And that era of Michigan football was one of the worst eras in the program's history. All right, well, we lost power. Well, Nick lost power. I lost power actually before we went on today. But we were recording probably at about
30-ish minutes.
Yeah, we recorded about 30 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
It was about 6 o'clock or something when power went out. Now it's 9:30. So this is
3 hours
longest. Yeah, this is one of the longest podcasts ever. But we are back. Nick has power. I have power. We're all ready to go.
For now, we need like 30 minutes of power and we can finish this up.
Yes. Just give us 30 minutes of power and we will be all set. So when we left off, Nick, we were wrapping up the I guess the pessimistic portion of all of this. And why isn't Michigan going to be successful this year? Maybe that's the wrong way to put it. Why Michigan really won't meet
the obstacles to repeating.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Good way of putting it. And as we're wrapping up, I was talking about, the last time that Michigan tried to um, change up what they do on offense, try to have a sexy
hmm
offense. And when they tried to go to the spread offense
hmm
after the Appalachian State season, which they, when they lost that game. And Nick, if you wanted to, give any final thought on that, or, our first segment here, then
Yeah.
please go ahead.
The last bit I'll say about that is sort of a hot take. I think Michigan boosters pushed Rich Rod out too early. I think one of the biggest I think there's a lot of proof to show that he would have been successful at Michigan, but literally reinventing the offense from a power heavy, you know, scheme under Carr and everything before that through Schembechler, like, takes time. There's going to be some down seasons as you're getting your people in, and I think the best example of that is after he was fired, Michigan won the Sugar Bowl with Brady Hoke as coach. Brady Hoke was ass for the last 3 years of his tenure there. Like, if Rich Rod had the time to develop it, you become Ohio State, who ran the spread offense very successfully against the rest of the Big Ten up until this previous year. Like, they were the kings of the Big Ten because they adapted and modernized their game. And I think while keeping some of the strong defense that they've had, which to finish up the segment, well, Michigan has their own sort of like obstacles and offensive questions with QB and wide receivers, and like putting in a whole new O line. Even though I think the O line's still going to be very dominant, um, they're in a conference with Ohio State that is trying to pull exactly what Michigan pulled last year of like hey, everyone stay for one more year. We're going to win it all this year. And it's a championship or bust mentality. And that's why Michigan won this year. Championship or bust mentality. You also have Oregon. Oregon is a lot of people's favorite to win the Big Ten, as you mentioned. And they're my pick to win it all. Like, they're going to be very good. And Michigan has to play both of those teams, along with Texas, along with USC. And it's going to be a slog, especially compared to last year's schedule, which was very back heavy. This one, we play Texas week 2. That's not a ton of time to get it right. Even if we have QB questions, you have to be good against Quinn Ewers and that whole crew in Texas the next weekend. And it's just going to be hard. It's going to be hard.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's crazy to think that Michigan has Texas going into week 2. But you mentioned the defense.
Yes.
And we talked about the reasons why, Michigan is going to not be as good as last year. We have to talk about, though, why Michigan can go out and have another dominating season. And I mentioned at the top of the recording that I thought Michigan was going to be a playoff team this year.
Yeah.
I thought that they are going to be in the 12-team tournament. Do I think they're going to win the Big Ten? No. However, I think they're going to be in the 12-team tournament because of what they're able to do on defense. Their biggest strength is their defense.
Yeah.
And it could possibly be arguably the best defense in all of college football this year.
Yeah. There's arguments to be made for sure.
Definitely. And that's not to say that they haven't lost pieces on defense. I mean, they lost Jesse Minter to the NFL. Harbaugh took Minter with him to the Chargers. I'm looking at Pro Football Focus here. And they say the Wolverines sport the second best defensive line, the 7th best linebacker unit, and the 4th best secondary in the nation. 6 defenders made the top 10 of their respective PFF positional rankings, more than any other school. Again, it's defense, tough defense is a Michigan MO. it's as cliche as it sounds. That's where championships are made. That's
Right.
where winning is made. It's made on the defense. So, Nick, my opinion is Michigan can capitalize on last year's success through the defense. If
Yeah.
Michigan is going to capitalize on last year's success, where do you see that happening?
Yeah, I mean, like you said, they're top. They have arguments to be the best defense in college football. They're definitely top 3. I think the other competitive ones in that section are Georgia, who has lockdown defense. They're nasty, and Ohio State. Ohio State's really fucking good again. We cooked them, I think, offensively and I think scheme-wise the last 3 years because they weren't prepared for it. But they do have one of the better defenses in the country. Are again arguably the best. The good thing for Michigan is Mason Graham is back, and Kenneth Grant are back on the D line. That D line is going to be, like you said, would the rank 2? You said second best, probably behind Georgia
Pro
or
Football
Ohio
Focus
State.
had them second best defensive line.
Yeah, so probably behind Georgia or Ohio State. I would think Ohio State, but Mason Graham and Kenneth are they're disgusting. They're like some of the best players in the league. They're just going to be great. Our defensive line is going to be locked down. It's just going to be that again. There's no 2 ways around it. We had to say goodbye to Junior Colson and Michael Barrett for the linebackers. They both went to the league. But we had Hausman. I believe he was a transfer from, I can't remember now, but he transferred 2 years ago as a freshman. And then we got Jayshon Barham from Maryland this year, who was like all Big Ten in a ton of categories. And he transferred to Michigan from Maryland. Interconference always blows my mind, but that's how it goes. And he wants to play for an excellent defense and an excellent linebacker crew. They're both going to be great. I don't think you're going to see a ton of drop off in terms of quality of our linebackers, which was always a shortcoming for Michigan. Like that last year was a very good year, but previously our linebackers were not as talented as some of the other position players on defense. And then you also have arguably, the video game College Football 25 agrees with me. Will Johnson, I think, is the best player in the sport. He is so dominant. He's only gotten better as he's gotten older, and having him just like out on the side is going to be disgusting. It's just he's too good. He's simply just too good. Like we lost Sanders still, which sucks. He was very, very good. Rod Moore got injured after he said he was going to come back to Michigan for last year. Got injured. We're going to miss him. But we pulled a couple people in the transfer portal to get some depth rounded out. We pulled Jaden Mangham from MSU, which I thought was very funny, and he's also one of their better players, and screwed over MSU doubly, which is great because they have very few good players. And that's no hate. It is definitely hate, but it's the reality of MSU's program right now. They're just in a major rebuild. And we're just the better team. So we pull, some guys, and that's okay.
Yeah, I don't think there's there's nothing, there's no secret that, where Michigan State is at right now and where Michigan's at right now.
And I think Michigan State's going to be good. I think they got a great head coach. And they're going to be good in 5 years, but it's going to be a second, guys. And it's okay. You're going to be fine. Jonathan Smith's a great guy. He was stupid good at Oregon State for what he had access to, and Michigan State gives him more access to better facilities, better players, better NIL, better sponsorships, all that stuff that Oregon State ever could. He's going to be good. It's just going to take a second. It's going to take 5 years.
I'm a little
3 years.
I agree. There's some skepticism with me when it comes to, and I'm sorry, I don't know if they cover this at all on the Michigan State portion, but just real quick, what concerns me is him coming into the Big Ten, and this is a concern. It's a common concern when you're talking about coaches
Sure.
stepping out of their element, and he was a guy that was an Oregon lifer, state of
Mhm.
Oregon lifer.
Mhm.
I'm just, you just wonder how that transitions over to the Big Ten.
Yeah, right. And
And
who knows? But I mean, the Pac-12 wasn't like a slouch conference either. You know what I mean?
no, it wasn't.
Like he had some talent out there. He was playing against, national championship runner-up caliber teams in Washington, and Oregon, I think, also had a claim to be one of the better teams in the country last year. Like, he wasn't a slouch, and he performed really well. It's more, I think, of the Big Ten being so loaded with talent and coaching
Mhm.
talent now that you have to be really special to rise to the top, right? Um, I think Schroen's going to be great. You have Matt Rule at Nebraska. I think people forget about a lot. Like, I have full faith in him to turn things around at that college. Fickle's at Wisconsin now. Like, like you have Lincoln Riley. Like, not to even mention like the blue bloods in the conference. Like, it's going to be hard. Mike Loxley, I think, is criminally underrated at Maryland. He's turning that program around. Like, there's a ton of talent, and I think that's going back to the pessimist side. Long-term success in Michigan is going to be, can Schroen rise to the top and be one of the top 3-4 coaches in the conference. That being said, defense is keeping us in every game. I don't think I would be shocked if we're blown out by any of like the big 3, maybe 4 teams we're going to play this year. Like our 4, I think it's no secret. The 4 biggest games are Texas, USC, Oregon, and Ohio State. Those are the big 4. You could maybe throw in Washington if you really wanted to. First road test, national championship rematch, but like, who knows?
No,
So,
completely.
yeah, I think
Yeah.
Michigan's like floor this year is like 9 wins. And I don't think I'm like crazy for saying that. I think their floor is like between like 8.5. If I had to, I'm not even gonna look up what the Vegas odds are. I bet their wins over under are 8.5.
You know what? Now that you mention that, I don't think we weren't going to do this, but we still have a little bit of time.
Mm-hmm.
Let's go through the schedule and just do a quick win
Yeah.
loss. But we'll do that right at the end. There's a couple of other things that I want us to get to here before we move on to that, though.
Yeah.
Sharon Moore. I think that this year in and of itself, I think is going to be, you're still going to see a very competitive Michigan team.
Yes.
Next year is going to be a different question for him. However,
Yes.
Sharon Moore, how do you think his team is going to differ this year from, Harbaugh's teams of the past, which, again, it's Harbaugh teams are very, very, they're very specific.
Yes.
You know what a Harbaugh team was. How is Sharon Moore going to kind of put his stamp on this program and make it his own?
So I don't think execution-wise, it's going to differ all that much. I'm going to be honest. I think the lines are still going to be locked down. Like, again, top 3 in the nation on both sides of the ball. The lines are always going to be great. That's a huge plus. Games are won in the trenches. Ohio State games are, especially Ohio State games, won in the trenches. Team with the most rushing yards in that game has won it the last like 17 years or something like that off the top of my head. It's an unbelievable statistic. So having the good lines is going to stay. Having I think, elite defense is going to stay. He hired the right guys. He's not going backwards. If anything, he's locking in that by pulling in Wink Martindale, like the forefather of our last 2 successful defensive coordinators, which are now both in the NFL. Like, Minter and McDonald were both learned from Wink. Like, he is the godfather of the scheme we run. And to pull him away and be like, hey, man, like, we need a last-second replacement. Like, could you leave your NFL job and come to Michigan? And him to say yes, that's huge. Like, that's, to me, that's locking in the mentality of defense first, defense wins championships, and we're going to be great. That being said, I think the biggest difference between Harbaugh's teams and Moore's teams is going to be in recruiting and the implementation of NIL and all that stuff. Yeah, the execution is going to be the same, but I think Moore is going to be a lot more successful in going to the portal and using NIL to our advantage. And I think you're already seeing that pay off in terms of like players like Jaden Daniels, who's going to be a freshman quarterback this year. He's probably going to redshirt, I would assume. I would be shocked if he gets any playing time, let alone enough to break a redshirt. I think he's going to be good. He's a 5-star, I think maybe right on the edge of 4-star quarterback. It's only going to get better. I really think that Sharon Moore has the drive to work in a modern system that I don't think Harbaugh ever was going to get to. Harbaugh started being successful when he got younger coaches who were more interested in modern game. When he was stuck on old school Schembechler defense, and you're coming here for the heart, and that's all we need. We don't need the 4 stars and 5 stars. We just need the 3 stars. And sometimes, maybe we get a Jabril Peppers or whatever, like to round it out. And that worked because he's fucking Jim Harbaugh. He's a very good coach. He's one of the best to ever do it. But it's not how the modern game's going to progress. And to be competitive, especially in one of the 2 super conferences, you have to be aggressive in the transfer portal and aggressive in NIL. Now, do I think Michigan's going to be the Texas A&M or whatever and give Lamborghinis to their recruits? Fucking no. Like, that is not who Sharon wants. That's not who Michigan wants. I think above all, Michigan is going to solidify a deep core, because I think having depth last year is what won us the championship, having minus QB space, but having a lot of guys who buy into the idea and the system is how Michigan succeeds. They're not the, again, super flashy, super sexy 5 stars. They're not getting the Lambos and they're going to transfer after not getting played freshman year. They're going to be going to school for the Block M, buy into the culture, get a pretty penny because Michigan has a lot of pretty pennies to hand out, and succeed. And I think that's going to be the culture. And I think Sharon has the ability to do both. Where I think Harbaugh only realized after he hired people like Sharon, like McDonald, when he did his whole retool of his assistants in 2021, that's when we started pulling a lot better recruits. That's when we started playing a lot better because we modernized in the ways that it matters, right? We didn't get too crazy. We didn't start running crazy shit and trying to mimic other teams. We still stayed Michigan, but modernized the talent and the skill, I guess, around it. Like, because it is a game. It's a separate game. You have to keep now recruiting your players after you already won their recruiting for years. And you have to get to do that. You have to get them to buy in, right? Like, and I think Sharon's going to be really good at that and still be able to pull in more talent, because that is then a recursive cycle. The more you win, the more talent you get. It's easier to sell, right? So I think that's where he's going to differ from a Harbaugh program. Is execution is going to be very the same, strong lines, but he's a better recruiter. The people he hired are better recruiters. He got Tony Alford from OSU, their running backs coach. Like, he's an insane recruiter and an insane running backs coach. He coached some of the best running backs out of Ohio State the last 10 years. That's where the edge is going to be. Like, and you can see the intention. Now, is that going to be successful immediately? Who the fuck knows? I just hope that the Michigan boosters have learned the lesson, like I mentioned with
Richrod,
and even with Harbaugh. People wanted his head after 2020, and me included. I thought he was done, and he would have been done if he didn't modernize the whole system, and he did. And Sharon is a product of that. So I can only assume it's going to carry forward in that regard. The question is Sharon going to be the same level of Harbaugh as Harbaugh? Like, does he need the more talent to close that skill gap on coach? That remains to be seen. I will say he's 4-0. 4-0, and 2 of those were top 10 opponents. And he won a national championship. So
I'm so glad that you mentioned, being able to stay in tune with, how modern the game is now. Because that is so important. And you made such a good point when you were talking about just how important that is to be in tune with today's game, because we've seen it over and over again where coaches weren't able to adapt
Yeah.
to what the game is now. And I hate saying this because people are going to be like, "Oh my God, like he's the greatest coach of all time," and he is. But I think part of the reason why Nick Saban was getting out of it when he did is because the game is starting to run past him a little bit.
It's now a 300, more so than it already was, because it was a full year commitment versus NFL. You have the offseason as an actual offseason for players, coaches, assistants, teams. It's an actual offseason. You don't have to worry about anything. You're in the NFL, you have your contract signed. College football is a 365 day a year job, and it is. And it kind of sucks, but college football people are crazy. Like, I don't like, that's why Harbaugh was such a good fit in college football. He's insane. He's an insane person. Dabo Sweeney, I think, is insane. He's one of the ones who hasn't modernized, but he is insane in a way that, like, you have to be in college football. That's why, like, you don't see a lot of successful transfers between college and the pros, because you have to be a certain level of insane for college, I think. And you can't be that insane for the pros. Like, it's one of those things where you have to modernize constantly. You have to update your stuff constantly. And I think, yeah, Saban got tired. I think Dabo is tired of having to recruit 24/7, 365. He is, and Clemson's suffering because of it. And they're not bad, but they're not one of the two best teams in the country for 5 years and have a dynasty.
Exactly.
And I think in a sense of how bad and how much I don't like the modernization of college football and the commodification of it and the conglomeration of it, so to speak.
Yeah, absolutely.
As much as I hate that level of it, it's going to create better parity, straight up. I think there are probably 5 teams, maybe up to 8, that are competitive that could win a national championship this year. Like, if the cards fall the right way, because winning a championship in any sport requires a lot of luck, especially in a 12-team tournament that is a single elimination. A lot of that is luck, right? Like, any given Sunday, or on Saturday in this case, the other team could win. I mean, it's just how it goes, right? Like, does Michigan beat Alabama every time in the Rose Bowl? Absolutely not. But they did on that night. They did on, January 1st, 2024. That's all that mattered. You know what I mean? Like, and if not, Alabama probably wins and sends Saban home with another national championship.
And 3 years ago, you're probably not dreaming that Michigan is beating Alabama,
right,
in a bowl game.
Right. And so now you have at the top, I think, echelon of college football, you have Ohio State, Oregon, Ohio State, Oregon, and Georgia are probably the top 3 that are heavy favorites. Past that, you have, Michigan is in that second tier. I would say Washington's in that second tier, probably. Like, they'll probably continue some success. Ole Miss, you have LSU, you have Alabama, which is insane to say that they're in a second tier right now, but we just don't know how good Kalen DeBoer is going to be in an essence. Yeah, you have Texas, you have, just even Oklahoma, I think, like, they have the money and stuff to come back and be a powerhouse. There's just so much. Penn State is in that tier. Like, there's so many more teams that can win. I was going to say Florida State, and then they lost to Georgia Tech. But I think Florida State's probably in that tier still. Like, you know what I mean? Like, there's excellent teams. And to be the champion, it just got a lot harder. Previously, you could recruit, and I think it was the same way that, South Carolina recruited against UConn in women's basketball, like 10 years ago. We're recruiting against UConn. You're coming to South Carolina to beat UConn, and that's fine. That only works as long as there's a big bad, right? That works as long as Alabama's at the top. That works as long as Georgia's at the top. With 10 teams at the top, who the hell knows how it's going to play out? I'm just really excited. I think it's going to be a great, season and tournament at the end of the year.
I 100% agree with you. Switching gears a little bit, and I don't want to spend a whole lot of time on this just because it's kind of an outlier to everything that we're talking about right now. I real quick, I just have to get your opinion on the whole Connor Stallions thing.
Yeah.
because it's still going to be a topic of conversation this year.
Yeah.
It's especially so if Michigan doesn't do well this year, which I think that they
Sure.
will. But if they don't do well, the first thing people are going to point to is Connor
Yeah.
Stallions.
Sure. Sure.
Your real quick, your thoughts on the criticism on
Yeah.
Stallions himself.
I'm going to sound like a homer, but I don't think it's really that homerish from an objective point of view. College football is a game of pushing the line.
Mhm.
It has been since Miami in the late 90s. Probably before that, there are arguments to be made. You toe the line as close as you can to doing something illegal. Sign stealing is so far down that fucking list in terms of things that happen, and all the hand wringing and sadness that came out of like, oh, we have to change our schemes and all this stuff. It's like, you dumb motherfuckers, you were already doing that. Like, it is an insane thing. It's Oppo research, man. Like, every team has a binder of what the signs could possibly be. Watching the scoreboards, the live feeds at home. You have your dumb freshman interns that are just desperate to be a part of the football team. Do that. Menial work. You mark down every sign when they do this. All right, what plays next on the bracket here? Like, what's going on? And you try your best to get that advantage. Now, by the letter of the law, what Connor Stallions did was extreme. I think, like, by the letter of the law, obviously broke it. Now, do I think it's a system or team-wide conspiracy? No. This guy was some crazy Marine who had a 500-page manifesto. Was that ended up with him being the head coach of Michigan football. I just want to point that out. This wasn't like, this is my 5-year financial plan. No, this was a manifesto to get him to the highest level of Michigan football that you could achieve as a layperson. You know what I mean? Like, not an athlete.
Yeah.
This guy was for sure breaking rules. He was going to games and videotaping the other sideline. 1, do I think other teams did it? Probably. 2, if you're getting a lot of good information from a guy that you just intern, essentially, for years, and you go, damn, this guy's pretty good. Are you going to question the information? Are you going to be like, hey, man, let's make sure you're doing this ethically, guy 7 rungs down the ladder of who actually matters when I'm doing all this other shit? Like I said, in a 365-day a year job? No. Do I think there were some bad initial reactions of coaches deleting text messages and saying the players don't talk to anyone and stuff? And then the players, because the culture at Michigan is good, told the NCAA that this coach said that, don't talk to the NCAA. I think that's a pretty good sign of like what the culture is at Michigan, of like, hey, like our own coach, who's our boy, said not to talk to you guys. You should check that out. I think that's a good indication of like how serious the allegations are. And now, what does that mean for the NCAA? Who the fuck knows is the answer. Until we know until the allegations come out, or until the punishments come out, the NCAA could do anything from a slap on the wrist, don't do it again, or they could do this, song and dance of a Harbaugh show cause for the hamburger illegal bad recruit thing during COVID, a contact and all this stuff, and say you're banned from the NCAA for 4 years after he's already gone to the NFL. The NCAA just, and I think the consolidation of the two super conferences and all this stuff has no authority anymore. And they try to posture it. They are a puppet government, and that's fine. But I can't say like what the actual outcome is going to be, because I don't know. They could do anything from like a bowl ban, which would be, I think, extreme, to like, yeah, it was just him. Like, here's a couple sanctions showing you're not coaching the first 3 games or whatever. Like, whatever it is. I can't pretend I'm going to predict what the punishment's going to be. I just think the whole thing is a silly exercise in Harbaugh being an advocate for players' rights, saying players should get paid and split the big money that the Big Ten is making as they consolidate the conference and get bigger and bigger TV deals. I think he pissed a lot of the wrong people off, people in power that have connections. And it sounds conspiratorial, and maybe I'm a homer, but like, it's extreme for sign stealing, something that, not stealing, but like recording signs is something that everyone does, and it's just good scouting. And you change up your signs every week because it's good scouting, especially against big teams. So like when Ohio State's like, oh, we have to change our scheme, the only reason we lost is because of sign stealing in year 3 of this. No, you didn't. No, you didn't. It's just you're coping, and that's fine. I cope when we lose to Ohio State too. But there's a lot of people want blood because it's Michigan, and that's fine. We're a big dog. It's okay. I get it. So my take is that it's a nothing burger.
I think that a few things for me regarding all of this. I think that well, I know why the rule is in place. Obviously, it's
Sure.
It's to protect teams who don't have the money necessarily that Michigan
Sure.
or Ohio State or Alabama
Sure.
has to send those guys, to
Absolutely.
send scouts on the road.
It's also a rule that
videotape.
they talked about removing from the rule book 2 years ago. Just
And you know what?
so we're clear.
You bring that up. I think it's something they're going to remove from the rule book
100%.
because I think college football is moving into a direction where they're going to have a conference that consists of super teams. It's going to be a super conference for super teams. Nick, you and I both like soccer.
Yeah.
And I remember a couple of years ago when they were talking about a super league breaking away from the Champions League.
Yeah.
I think that's probably what's going to eventually happen with college football.
Yeah.
You're going to have a super league of major college football teams that are not going to be worried about money. I mean, money isn't going to be an issue.
Buku bucks.
Yeah. So if teams want to go send scouts on the road and videotape the other team's sidelines, I think that that's something that's probably going to be allowed, just because teams are going to have the resources to do it.
And the thing is, it doesn't really matter anymore. You can have in-helmet communications now.
You can have in-helmet communications, and you're not going to be put against mid-major teams anymore. You're not going to be put up against teams that they don't have the resources to do something like that. Now, as far as punishments go, because yes, that is a very real question. It's a very real issue if you're a Michigan fan and if you're the Michigan football program, because the NCAA still hasn't handed down everything that they can potentially hand down. Do I think that they're going to come down hard on Michigan? No, for a couple of reasons. One, their main target is gone. Harbaugh is no longer the head coach anymore. He's in the NFL. He's not coming back. If he does come back, then he will be hit with something heavy.
Sure. Because if the NCAA exists when that happens.
Exactly. He's gone. I don't think that they're going to go after Michigan too much because Michigan's a big moneymaker for college football. And that's what it all boils down to. Do you think that the networks want to see Michigan have a bowl ban?
No, of course not.
Do you think that they want to see Michigan have a college football playoff ban? Absolutely not. If you're CBS, if you're ABC, whatever, you are going to be going up to the NCAA and saying, hey, if you want our money coming in, then you are not going to touch Michigan.
Yeah.
And it
sounds shitty to say, but you're right.
That's exactly what it is. And the networks are going to be dictating everything that happens in college football from here on out. And it's going to keep on happening more and more every single year. You talked about the conglomerate that is happening right now with college football. And that's something that you don't like. And I don't like it either. But That's
Until
the
the-
fact of the.
Yeah, until the government steps in, the networks run college football now.
Absolutely. The other reason why I don't think they're going to get a massive punishment, because you have to go back a little bit further, and you have to look at the precedent that's been set with a lot of this, a lot of the wrongdoing in college football.
Mhm.
You could take the absolute worst of the worst that happened, and you can go all the way back to the Penn State thing with Jerry Sandusky,
Mhm.
and you look at what happened there, and I'm no way trying to compare what happened then to what happened
No,
now
no.
with Michigan.
But it
However,
sets a ceiling, right?
it sets a ceiling, and in retrospect, and when you take a step back and look at that punishment that Penn State got for that,
Yep.
it was a slap on the wrist.
Effectively, yeah.
It was an absolute slap on the wrist. So if Michigan goes out and gets bowl bans and loss of scholarships and everything like that, then when you compare it to some of the worst that has happened in college football, it's going to be too much.
Yeah.
Which is why I don't think anything's going to happen. Anything,
I mean, that's my feeling as well.
remotely damaging. When you look at the ceiling and when you look at what Michigan does for college football from a monetary standpoint, not a whole lot is going to happen, and not a whole lot can happen.
Yeah.
So anyways, yes, Connor Stallions is.
I'm excited for the doc, for what it's worth. I think it's going to be interesting. That's a day one watch.
Yeah. I think it comes out tomorrow, actually. I think it comes out tomorrow.
Yeah, I think you're right.
But yeah, and he's over at Mumford High School, coaching the defense there now too. So
Hilarious. Just
if anybody
so good.
If anybody wants to go, check out Connor Stallions in action, head down to Detroit, Mumford High School. He is the new defensive coordinator there, and the coach there said himself that one of the only reasons why he got Connor Stallions on board is because basically the team sucks and they need some notoriety.
Inject some fun into it. If you're gonna suck, at least be cool, right?
Yeah. Anyways, though, Nick, real quick, let's go through the schedule, a simple win, loss, and see where Michigan's at the end of the year. Are you ready?
Yeah, I'm ready.
All right. Week 1, this coming Saturday, Fresno State at home, 7:30 kick on that one. I think we all know that's going to be a win.
I would hope so. I would really. I mean, I can't listen. I can't talk about any season opener without having PTSD of Appalachian State. I would hope to God that Fresno State's going to be fine. I was fuming against Western Michigan as a season opener like 2 years ago because I was so convinced Michigan was going to suck in 2021. I was fuming against struggling against Western early on. I think that's a win though. Again, defense I think is going to smother them. Night game, start the year. It's going to be too hype in the big house. It's not happening. Sorry, Fresno. Sorry, Bulldogs.
Week 2, Texas at home against the Longhorns.
The homer in me so badly wants to say a win. So I'm just going to say a win. I think Michigan is going to sort of shock the world. I think Michigan's sort of underrated by a lot of people. And not to say Texas, I think, is underrating them or like not coming prepared for Michigan at the big house. Of course they are. I think Michigan's defense can shut down Texas's offense. And I don't think Texas's defense is that great. It'll be fun. It'll be a fun one. I think it's the marquee game of the week. I would not be shocked if College Game Day is there, if Big Noon Kickoff is there. It's on. It is Big Noon Kickoff already. I think it's been announced for Fox. So I would not be shocked if College Game Day is also there because it's a big ass game. It's the first sort of big clash between Big Ten and SEC of the season. What could have been a national title, matchup. Yeah, I'm it's such a toss-up. It could go either way, I feel like. So we can come back to it maybe. We'll see how I feel out. We'll see.
If this was on the road, as cliche as it sounds, if it was on the road, I'm going to pick Texas. Since
100%.
it's the big house, though.
100%.
I'm going to go with Michigan on this one.
Yeah. Arkansas State, it has to be a win. It has to be. You got bigger problems if it's not. USC, I think, is also going to be a win at Michigan Stadium.
Completely agree.
USC, I think, and it remains to be seen. I don't think has solved their defensive struggles from the previous year. And I don't care how good and explosive your offense is. You lost Caleb Williams.
Yep.
And you just aren't going to have the juice. USC is a good team, though. I think it'll be a lot closer than a lot of people think, but I think Michigan comes out on top.
We're talking about J.J. McCarthy leaving and Michigan being affected by that. You're sure as hell are talking about Caleb Williams.
Of course.
Being gone from USC.
I think Michigan's offense is in a much better place than USC's offense. How about that? And for how pessimistic I was this podcast about Michigan's offense, yeah.
Minnesota.
Excuse me. I, again, sure hope that's a win. It's at home. Rivalry game for the Brown Jug. PJ Fleck is fine. He's just so extremely
annoying.
Okay. And that's okay. That's okay.
I hate his stupid tie and the stupid row the boat bullshit.
Yeah, just that guy sucks.
So fucking annoying.
Just. I will give him props for when we beat the shit out of Minnesota last year. And he said in the press conference afterwards, Michigan's going to win the national championship. They're the real deal, and they are nasty out there. I was like, hell yeah, PJ Fleck. That's the first thing I've liked about you in years.
We are 5-0.
Yeah,
go ahead.
You were cute and fun at Western. That's over. You're in the big boy league now.
Yep. We're 5-0 heading into October. Nick, first time on the road.
Mm-hmm.
Big test against Washington.
That's a great place to play. I'm excited. I have more opportunities to get out there now. To go see Michigan play in Seattle at Husky Stadium, right on the Sound there. Beautiful place, loud place, national championship rematch. I think Michigan comes out on top. I do. I don't think Washington again. Washington a lot like Michigan had attrition. Washington had attrition and a half. They were juiced up to win that natty, like TCU was, and like others were, but they had a lot. They lost Penix. They lost to Dunze. They lost a whole slew of talent. And I think it's gonna be close. It's gonna be a great game. It's gonna be a beautiful game. Michigan comes out on top. 6-0 starting the season. I know.
I'm gonna go with a loss on that one. That's where the experience comes in. Yes, that's where the experience comes in, plays a factor. You're on the road.
Washington's got a new head coach.
I know they do.
I think Michigan Michigan, again, with attrition, is still returning a shitload of people that have starting minutes. It's underreported on, but I'll have to pull. I'll see if I can pull the stats real quick while we talk about the other ones. But like, we're returning way more people than I thought we were. And it's kind of nasty. Anyways, yeah, we can move on to the next pick because I think we all know what this next one's going to be
easy. Next one's no debate at Illinois.
Win easy. Yeah, I don't think there's any disagreement there. Halloween weekend again. I'm actually I'm a huge fan of Halloween weekend being Michigan State. I think it's a fantastic idea to try to keep consistent. Because, I mean, previously, I feel like we used to play Michigan State like 4th game or 5th game of the year, like really early on. Pushing it back to Halloween weekend when both teams can be competitive, who knows? Like, it adds a little bit of mystique to it. Highly recommend it.
It kicks off that final stretch.
It's a perfect, right.
Too.
Perfect final stretch kickoff. I think it's a win for Michigan. Michigan State, sorry, you're bad. Sorry.
No, I agree. I definitely think that that's a win for Michigan State. So, or I'm sorry, a win for Michigan. Sorry.
So pause here. Talking about veterans starting on experience, I pulled it. Out of the projected starting lineup for Fresno this weekend, of the 22 players projected to start, only 2 are sophomores or younger.
And that's for Michigan.
For Michigan, only 2 of the projected 22 starters are sophomores or younger. And those 2 are Samaj Morgan, who's a stud, and a redshirt freshman, Jari Hill. That's it. So there's experience. There's people that know how to play on the road. They got a ton of road experience last year, dominating Minnesota or whatever, and we pull our starters in the fourth quarter. That's why I'm high on the Washington test.
It's a game. It's a game that I think they could win.
Absolutely.
Not going to be surprised if they do win it.
Yeah.
I'm just trying to find games though because I do think Michigan is going to take a step back this year. I'm trying to find games that they lose this year that shows that they've taken a step back.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that that's potentially one of them.
Sure.
Moving into Oregon though on November 2nd, because right now you have them at 8-0 and I have them at 7-1.
Yeah.
Oregon at home. Again, a potential national champion contender here. Big Ten contender or Big Ten championship contender here.
Realistically, it's a loss. Is it possible? I'm not saying it's a total loss. I'm not saying Michigan is not going to be competitive. I think realistically it's going to be a loss, but there's always a chance. It's at home, which helps Michigan a lot.
Sure.
It's against Oregon, who's going to be traveling a long way to play. Mm-hmm. That helps a lot. It's in November. Oregon still plays in the cold, but it's not the same cold as potentially
it's a different
Michigan
type of
November
cold.
cold.
Yep, I know. Yep, I know exactly what you're saying. We
that
both
helps,
live in Michigan. Yep.
Yeah, it helps a lot. Do I think Oregon still probably has the talent to do it? Yeah, they're fucking Oregon. They're great. They're my national championship favorite. I think I will say loss for my own college football objectivity that I pretend to have.
So their first loss of the season for you is coming up week 10 against the Oregon Ducks. Week 11 though, they go on the road, take on Indiana. Again, road games in the Big Ten I know are tough, but again, it's Indiana.
Yeah.
I'm taking a win for Michigan. Week 13, come back home, play Northwestern. I think it's another win for them.
Yeah.
Michigan. And then to finish out the season, obviously they go on the road, take on Ohio State for week 14.
Yeah.
I think it's a loss.
I have to, just out of pure objectivity, I have to say it's a loss. I think, honestly, the craziest part about what this year is that I think the floor at worst is like 8 wins. Like at absolute worst, we drop games we shouldn't against, I think USC and Washington. Like 8 wins, I think, is the floor. The ceiling, is 12 wins. I think they could, in a perfect world, obviously, go undefeated again. They have the ability to. The problem is that they're playing 3 top 5 teams this year.
Yep.
That's the biggest hurdle. Like, talking about even making the playoffs, they're gonna play 3, maybe 4 playoff teams in their regular season just to get to that point. You know what I mean?
That's why, week 2 against Texas is going to be such a barometer on how things could potentially go. Even if they go out in that game, play well and still lose, it's still going to say a whole lot on where this team could potentially go and where this team can grow throughout the season. They go out and get railroaded and, at home against Texas, then you could be looking at a longer season. But You mentioned the floor being 8 wins, and I mean, in all fairness, you can find 8 wins or eight wins on this season and 4 losses
Mhm.
on the season. You can definitely look at Texas. You can look at USC. You can look at Washington. You can look at Oregon,
Yeah.
and so on and so forth. But I mean, again, too. Both you and I both agree that we still think that they're going to be good this year. And at 10-2, where you have them, yeah, that gets them into the playoff.
10
I
and
think
2, 10 and 2 makes them the playoffs.
Yeah, I think 9 and
Without
3 gets them
question.
into the playoff. I think 9 and 3 gets them into the playoffs.
I think 9 and 3 gets them into the playoffs. They need a little bit extra help from others in ACC and Big 12 and stuff. It gets them in as like an 11 seed or 12 seed. I think 9 and 3 makes it, one, because it's Michigan. You got the little bit of alumni bump there, and what we were talking about, the network love, the money, yeah. But I think 9 and 3 is a realistic realistic record for this team going into this year. With the attrition we've had, new head coach, all that stuff, 9 and 3 is a phenomenal year. Like, really, truly an excellent year. But yeah, I'm not going to pretend I'm a homer. I think they, like I said, they can go 12-0. There's a world in which they do. Now, does the coin flip the right way every time? I don't know. They can. I think they're a cusp playoff team. I think they probably are going to finish the season somewhere between 7 and 12. Or I would say 7 and 15, maybe. There's only 3 spots that aren't in the college football playoff there. I would kill for a home playoff game at Michigan Stadium. The first one, because it will happen, the first one is going to be fucking electric. It's going to be incredible. Middle of December or end of December, early January, snow, cold as shit in Michigan, pulling some bumfuck SEC team up here is going to be electric. It's going to be awesome.
No, you see, that's another reason why why Nick Saban got out of it. For the thought of having to go up north and play in the winter.
You don't get to play on the nice indoor covered Mercedes-Benz ass stadiums. Get your ass up here. You're playing in the snow. It's going to be great.
No, instead he's gonna be on game day on
which I think he's a great addition for.
Yeah,
for the record.
Yeah. Anyways, is there anything else that you want to mention before we close things out tonight?
I would like to a come to Jesus moment for the Michigan fan base listening in. We won the national championship. No matter what the NCAA allegations say, whatever the nonsense comes through, whatever the record, even if we go 7 and 5. We won a national championship last year and had a ton of turnover, and that's okay. Sherrone Moore is going to be a great head coach. It's going to be okay. Have some patience, have some courtesy. That being said, if we beat the Buckeyes, this season is just the most delicious gravy. It doesn't matter. We can go 1-11, and if we beat the Buckeyes and ruin their lives, even if we don't make the playoffs, it's wonderful. So, yeah. If
you beat the Buckeyes, Ryan Day's job is done.
It's over. It doesn't matter if you he would literally have to win I think to be honest, this is a full sidebar. He has to win the national championship or be in the national championship game this year to keep his job. It doesn't matter if he beats Michigan. He needs to boat race Michigan and make the national championship game. Those are the two things. If Michigan game is too close and they still make the playoffs and he doesn't win the national championship, he's gone. The point being, the season's gravy. Enjoy it. Keep wearing the merch. We're going to be fine. 10-2. We're going 10-2. We're going to make the playoffs. And we can win it. Who the fuck knows? It's a one-game playoff. Who cares?
Do you want to throw out where they could find you? On social media?
Yeah.
Why don't you go ahead?
You can find me at NIFI22 on Twitter. And most socials. I'm on Instagram. I do a lot of photography for DCFC and stuff. At unsolicited_nickpics. NICKPICS. And after that, yeah, I mean, just I guess make fun of my takes. I don't care. I think it's funny. So
Nick, thanks for joining us. It's been great, and we definitely have to have you on again as the season progresses.
Yeah,
to talk.
always happy to talk Michigan football. One of my few loves in this world.
All right, well, that's Nick Finn. Thank you, Nick, and we'll be talking again soon.
Go Blue. Fuck Ohio State.
We are back. So once again, we want to give out big shout outs to not only Nick Finn, but Chris Monroe for joining Adam and myself in these separate portions covering both the previewing both Michigan and Michigan State's college football season. Michigan State's, at the time of this recording, opens up first tomorrow night, Friday, August 30th at Spartan Stadium. Michigan opens up on Saturday, August 31st. It's a big time frame in general. It's a great transitional period. The leaves are starting to change. You get to hear us talk more, not just about the international football we love, but also the American foosball. So, and also, I won't be surprised to see these shows here. I know Nick's joined us regularly for Detroit City post-match recaps. Chris, if you will probably talk, if not college basketball, definitely with college hockey, because Chris watches so much college hockey. It's fucking insane. But we've talked about those things. You've seen us talk about those
Maybe
things.
we should get them both on at the same time just to get the banter going back between the two of them.
Do we want to get like Gwen or like Regan or Puck in too, just to see on there? I mean, I'd love to. And here, the tough part, we only talked. I might have told you this. The only thing I regret about going to Central Michigan is no hockey school on there. So essentially, at that point, where they had club hockey, but they didn't have everything else, whereas Western did. So hats off Sean Kelly and everybody else on that. But all right, we talked enough about college sports. We got to roll into the brief recaps and stuff. So we're going to start off. As much as you would think we're hyped for the Lions to start next weekend, the Detroit Tigers said, "Hey, don't forget about us." And how many times have we written them off this year on this Detroit City Sportscast? I know we've done it multiple times.
I mean, we've talked about the Tigers, a fair share.
Yeah.
And it's always been one of those things where, it's like, prove it to us.
Yeah.
Win games, do what you need to do, and if you don't do it, then that's where we're kind of at with them is, when we last left off, they just weren't winning games, and
right.
They took themselves out of the race for the division, out of the race for the wild card. They were sellers at the deadline, and it was kind of left at that. Since then, they have become one of the hotter teams in baseball. And I mean, they lost today, but they ended up taking the series against the Los Angeles Angels. They're coming off of a 4-game sweep of the Chicago White Sox. Now, say what you want about the White Sox, they're an awful team. But when you can go on the road and take 4 from an opponent, that's great, especially considering too where we're at with the Tigers right now. Like I said, they traded away
Jack Flaherty got dealt
pieces. Yep. And they're playing basically all their kids right now. The future is now, in a sense, with the Tigers, and they've been coming through. They're 4.5 games back of the 5 now, because they lost today. They're 5 back of the Twins for that final wild card spot. And the Twins have been sliding. The Twins have been sliding of late, and the Tigers, I believe, have the 3rd easiest remaining schedule this season. So the possibilities are there for them to get that final wild card spot. Now
Yep.
it's a huge uphill battle for them to do that, and I mean, odds are they won't, but still, what have we always asked for with this team is since they've just been completely awful for the past several years is make September interesting.
Yep.
Be in the
And now with
graphic,
that,
make September interesting.
and now with that too, you look at it. So Jack Flaherty dealt. Casey Mize on, I think, wound up on the 60-day IL. Reese Olson hurt. So you've essentially have had
who just had bullpen days. They just had
I think
days.
And I think he's due to be back tomorrow from what I was hearing on the radio cast today. So basically you've had Tarek Skubal, you've had Cater Montero, who pitched a solid game in a 3-0 loss. And then other than that, you've been going into a bullpen and relying heavily on your bullpen. Tyler Holden, Bo Brisky, among others. But also you're seeing, as you were mentioning, Gio Urshela let go after the trade deadline, just placed on waivers. Trey Sweeney, who was involved in the trade for Jack Flaherty from the Dodgers, not only up, playing regularly, hit his first home run in Chicago. Our Channel 451 compatriot Dennis was actually at the Tigers-Cubs game.
And he had no choice but to play because Javi Baez is on the 60-day now with
done for the year.
Yep, getting his hip scope. So, which may be a blessing if you talk to some Tigers fans, but still you're catapulting a rookie into the lineup.
Jace Young as well, who's really stepped in. Dylan Dingler. And so a lot of these kids have been coming up in tier 2. And then time that with recalls from Toledo. Parker Meadows been back up. Looks like he needed those bats in AAA to become a little bit more consistent. Spencer Torkelson recently back up at the beginning of this month. Batting average is up about 20-something points from where he was at when he was sent down to Toledo. Seeing some strides in the swings. Zach McKinstry, 3 hits today. So I know a lot of people are like, yo, what? Every time somebody gets announced as for like DFA or every bit, people are like, what dirt does McKinstry have on Scott Harris? But 3 hits today. He kept the team going on there. Riley Green back from injury. Terry Carpenter back from injury. Now he's back from injury. Terry Carpenter's picking up where he left off. Dude hit some dingers last week. So 2 weeks ago. So point being is this team's getting hot at the right time. Not only did they win, they had 6 in a row. They went 12-3 in that span. So you're winning 75% of your games. You're over 500 for the first time in a long time. This is the latest the Tigers team has been in over 500 after the All-Star break since 2016. Thank you for putting that stat out earlier in the week, Adam. And if this team keeps up this momentum, they will be in the running for that, at least that last wildcard spot, because their next team that they face is 3-game series against the Boston Red Sox, the team that's directly ahead of them in this wild card race. After that, you got 6 in California, the 3 in San Diego against the Padres team, who's also holding on to the last wild card spot in the NL, 3 against the A's in their last trip ever to Alameda Coliseum. And then like I said, you have, other than playing the Orioles twice, a home and away, you have a cake schedule. You got the Rockies at home. You got the Tampa Bay Rays, who might be tough and around you in that wild card spot. And then you have the White Sox at home and a trip to Kansas City. So you have some head-to-head games to make ground, and you have some easy things to get in there. And I think the thing is that we still might be in a situation where, they meet our projected goals but don't make the playoffs. Part of that is because the Central Division is lights out better
in baseball. Yeah.
Take the White Sox out. I mean, the only other division I think in the AL that can come close is the East, because at least every team is somewhat in the running there, and then maybe NL Central. But I think if you look, especially like the Royals could do the biggest turnaround from in season history by times end. I think it's like 33, 34 wins. What we've seen, and they've already done, I think they're at 20 already, and there's still 20 something games of baseball left to be played. So it's wild times on there. But no, the Tigers are giving themselves a chance. I'm still saying, like, prove us. You put yourselves in this hole, get yourselves out of it. They're almost out of it, but they have to keep going on that. But the signs are positive. If this group of young kids can keep going on there. One factoid stat, I looked at this today because this tells you how weird of a season this is for the Tigers. 68 wins. They're 68 and 67 after the loss to the Angels today. 35 wins by the starting. The remaining 33 have been by the bullpen.
Yeah.
And when you count also for the starters, that 15 of those wins are by Tarek Skubal. That tells you it's been a anomalous, weird year, and that bullpen has put the team on their back at times. So
you have to wonder though too, moving forward, if they, I mean, because the series against the Red Sox is going to be a barometer, and if they come out winning this series, the Tigers may have to make some decisions when it comes to Tarek Skubal and whether or not they want to move him back to regular rest instead of this extended rest that they're doing with them. Because if you come out and you come out of this Red Sox series and you're back to like 4 games back of that wild card, then like I said, you have to make some decisions on what you
and you
wanna
got San
do.
Diego right after that.
And you have San Diego right after that. Another thing too, is Jackson Jobe. Will they end up calling up Jackson Jobe if things really start to get serious this final month of September? They call up a guy like Jackson Jobe, insert him into that rotation. You know, it's cool that we get to talk about stuff like this right now, because the past several years we haven't been able to do that. We can talk about this stuff right now. We can look ahead to next year. It kind of has that, that 2022 Lions vibe to it a little bit at the end of the season. So, which
vibe from this season too, if you think about it, like they're knocking, they're not quite there yet, but you're seeing the signs.
Yep, you're seeing the signs. They're knocking on the door, and for a young team, the young guys that are doing this, it's really, really exciting. So.
I think it's a good segue connection base. You're talking about young guys and getting excited. So now Detroit Lions time, preseason's over. Detroit Lions went 2-1 in their preseason, lost the first game to the New York Giants 14-3. But 2 wins that come from behind against the Kansas City Chiefs with a Jake Bates winning field goal, and then a come from behind in their only home preseason game this past Saturday against the Pittsburgh Steelers. The 53-man roster was announced Tuesday at 4 p.m. at the deadline. I'm probably not going to go into the specifics about that, because that's where I think I'll open it up to you to kind of get your thoughts and everything. And then just about, perfect. Yep. So what are some, mine obvious there's Hendon Hooker standing out in preseason, getting that second spot at QB with over Nate Sudfeld who got let go. What are some other surprises, interesting developments, even when you look at the 53-man, as well as maybe also that practice squad that this team announced?
I don't think there were too many surprises when it comes to the 53-man. They're not carrying as many wide receivers as I thought they would.
Right.
But obviously they let go of Donovan Peoples-Jones, and then they brought him back and signed him to the practice squad, which is good.
Right.
I don't mind that. There is a pathway though, because they went and they picked up Tim Patrick from the Denver Broncos,
which our Denver Broncos mega fan friend Sean Kelly was saying we were going to be enjoying that move. I think, there's a lot of, obviously injury riddled, but good amount of potential, I feel like.
Yeah, obviously the whole key with him is staying healthy. If he's able to stay healthy and he performs on the practice squad, there is a pathway for him to make his way up to the first squad, which is definitely something that can happen. Other than that, like I said, you got Donovan Peoples-Jones back on the team.
Shane Zylstra back on the team as well.
Yeah, they didn't have any of their cuts, any of their waiver guys get claimed by anybody. So they're able to sign most of those waived guys back to the practice squad, including Jake Fromm, who
Right.
essentially takes over that QB3 spot from Nate Sudfeld last year.
James Mitchell as well,
Yep, James
CJ
Mitchell.
Moore and Isaac Okwu are some other names I'm seeing from that who
Tom
featured in
Kennedy.
preseason. Yeah.
Yep. Tom Kennedy is also on there as well. And then they also claimed, actually, Metro Detroit native Trevor Nowitzki, tight end, off of waivers as well. So
Okay.
he joins the team, and yeah, I mean, other than that, like I said, not a whole lot of surprises. Jake Bates ends up getting that place kicker spot, which again, not a big surprise there, considering it was he was basically, if you want to bring politics into it, he was running unopposed for that position. So I mean, it's as good as as it's going to be with the Lions right now. They're stacked. They're pretty stacked from top to bottom. Everybody is.
Isaiah Williams making the wide receivers. I think Isaiah Williams had a really good preseason. So I think that's pretty good that he played himself into one of the four that's making that 53 man from what I'm seeing right now.
Yes. So yeah, I mean, like I said, I don't have that many crazy surprises. Obviously you want to keep an eye on DJ Reader and his health
Right.
heading into the start of the season, and when exactly he's going to be ready. But other than that, I mean, obviously you have a few nicks and bruises and everything like that, coming out of camp. I know Penei Sewell had, a little bit of a foot issue coming out. And obviously, some of the stuff that there was with some of the other guys. Terrion Williams had an issue. But yeah, I think they're coming out of training camp looking pretty good. So
yeah. I think if anything, what's good to show is I think that fighting mentality, that dog mentality, I feel like that Dan Campbell has been seemed to talk about. Even though we didn't see a lot of our guys that would see week in and week out on Sundays, Mondays, and any other days, there's football starting next weekend. I think the fact that we saw a lot of fight in this preseason team, fighting and coming from behind the way that they did and the progression, I think that's just a good sign of this team's character in general. And I'm very, very intrigued. And I don't want to say too looking forward to it. I'm manifesting a lot with this team, but I also feel like it all starts next Sunday night. Rams in town, Sunday Night Football. That place is going to be electric. Our young HR guy got tickets from his uncle, so he's already grabbed the earplugs from work yesterday because he knows he's going to be fucked hearing-wise come on next Monday. So I think that will be really interesting there. So, I mean, we're not going to do any predictions for that or anything like that. But we're looking forward to it. It's a fun time. So, moving on to a team that has been fun sometimes and opposite of that, Detroit City FC. Les Rouges had so the last time we talked Detroit City on Detroit City Sportscast, we were just coming off of the Rhode Island draw, and actually Rhode Island and Pittsburgh. Tunnel Talk, we talked about all the games that have taken place recently. There was a 3-game road trip Detroit City had, a 1-1 draw in the desert at Las Vegas Lights, 2 impressive wins at Birmingham Legion, at Tampa Bay Rowdies. Coming back in, taking on a Tulsa team, that FC Tulsa team that, wrote about it in my piece on the Majors Detroit website, talked about it with Sal Kuzmano in our post-game recap. Maybe a bit much rotation. Maybe we took FC Tulsa a little bit lightly, showing to be a pretty tough structural side, and got bit in the ass at home again. 1-0 loss to FC Tulsa. So thankfully, though, for Detroit City, other results were in their favor. Birmingham losing to a Pittsburgh team fighting to get into playoffs, Indy losing at Las Vegas Lights. So Detroit City goes into this matchup 2 days from now against Hartford Athletic, holding the last home playoff spot in the Eastern Conference. 2 points clear of Indy and Birmingham. How are you feeling going into that with what you've seen lately?
I feel fine. I think that I think you're right in your assessment that you're talking about a rotated, perhaps a too much of a rotated squad
Right.
heading into Saturday or this past Saturday, and that loss, just a very lackluster, uninspired loss. And you and I were talking on the phone the other day that all the criticism they got from that was very much deserved.
Right.
They deserve to have that much criticism from the fans and supporters and talking heads alike, because it was a bad performance. It was a uninspired bad performance. On the flip side, though, I think City fans, City supporters get a little too emotional. They get a little too worked up. They get a little too ahead of themselves. They overreact when it comes to losses like that, especially what they're coming off of those 2 games prior. It's not like they were losing a bunch of games before that. Yes, there are frustrating aspects to it. Losing leads late is frustrating. However, when you look at last season, this is something that Dennis pointed out the other day. When you look at last season and where they were, and this season and where they are, it's incredible that they even made the playoffs last year. Because we still have a whole slew of games left this year, and we are 3 points off?
6 points.
6 points off from our point total of last year, something like that.
4 points off of, let me think here. We're 4 points off the point total from last year. We've already scored more this year than we did last year. And we're almost, I think, near the win total too, if I'm not mistaken, because, and I think there are some positive signs. The only thing that I would be concerned about right now, as you and I have talked about, and I think also we talked about it with the gang, 451, latest episode of Tunnel Talk is out now, wherever you want to check it out, on home form. And, you're holding the last spot in the Eastern Conference home, which is great because of the crowd, but counterpoint. So Detroit City won their first 3 games at home this year on March the 23rd, April the 6th, April the 20th. Since then, they've been 1 win, 4 draws, 4 losses. They've only allowed 10 goals at home, which is good, but they've only scored 12 in 12 games. Whereas on the road, they allow more, but they score more. They've won more. They've garnered more points. And I think that's one part maybe that I think now teams have a psyche. We play better quicker. Teams come to Keyworth. They soak up the atmosphere in the crowd. They don't mind being the bad guys. They force City to have the ball and break them down. And I think that is rattling us at times lately. And we're getting draws, which is great. But then you also see when Tulsa has a really good game plan, 2 strong, tall, physical, athletic forwards. One takes the right side, one takes the left. Doesn't matter if they go down a man. They soak up the game. You have to find a way to break them down, and we couldn't on Saturday.
Yep. And you mentioned it too, how we've been playing at home. Something that we all need to realize is that this isn't the NPSL anymore. This isn't NISA anymore. A lot of these guys have played in hostile environments before. So Keyworth isn't anywhere near, the hostile environment that it's just coming out of nowhere on a lot of these opposing players. So
I think away players like to play in that environment, and it does boost them up a little bit. But it's, if anything, we got our own bit. I think it's anything that they don't have the mental head games. I think sometimes our guys do. Play into a whistle sometimes. Those little things, those little bits in there you and I have often talked about. Hartford Athletic on Saturday, 7 p.m. Hartford, it's weird because Hartford is next to bottom in the East. However, 6 points away from a playoff spot. First meeting on July 31st, Detroit City loses to Hartford Athletic 1-0, a game where City had the possession. City had some half chances. Hartford had great chances. forced Nate Steinwasser to extend a few times. They have fast forwards. Brendan Burke is played, if those remember, Colorado Springs 2022, so Michigan Galena, who's on that side. I think Hartford's they have a couple fast forwards, physical forwards, speedy players. This isn't the Hartford Athletic, I think, that we beat 3-0 last year without playing our best game. But it's going to be an interesting one. How do you see this one?
I expect us to win. I expect us to go out. I expect Danny to come up with a much better game plan than what we had last Saturday. I don't think that we're going to be taking Hartford lightly. I think we're going to go in, have a solid game plan, have a solid starting 11, and we are going to take all 3 points. That's what I expect, and that's what I think is obviously going to happen. So.
Little after 7 o'clock kickoff Saturday, August 31st, Keyworth Stadium. Should be a good night. The women's
They'll also
Black
be
Arrow
announcing the women's team Black Arrow at halftime, which is going to be cool.
So that'll be fun to say. Speaking of the women's team, be on the lookout. It'll be something that'll be on both 451 Detroit's YouTube as well as the Majors TV. Getting some plans, especially and simple, with at least Coach Dwayhe, maybe some more people about the season that was for the women and what's ahead. That's all we can tease, but it's going to be fun. Be on the lookout for that. As we said, latest Tunnel Talk episodes out. Also,
I'm assuming we're probably going to have a Make City Make Spence coming up here pretty soon as well.
Yeah, I would think so. Look for that maybe in the next week or two. And I think that's kind of it. Anything else you think I'm forgetting on the city on?
Nope. I think really.
Oh yeah. So also one note here, Detroit Red Wings schedule somewhere in the 15 to 17 games announced for national television this upcoming season. That tweet went out earlier this afternoon. Unfortunately, there's nothing on their website for me to verify the exact number. You might be looking at it right now.
Shocker with local Detroit professional teams not putting any information on their website, useful information on their website.
You mean it's not just? Never mind. I forget now. We do have more people listening to this podcast than we come to take on and realize. But yeah, that is about it on there. Adam, why don't you kind of fill in to kind of close, let people know all the different ways they can check out our content and where they can find us.
Check us out on our website, Detroit.themajorsports.com. You can get to all of our different socials from there: Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, at TMSNX Detroit. Also, get us on YouTube, youtube.com/TheMajorsTV. You can find me on Twitter as well at TMSNX Adam. Share, subscribe.
Damn right. As you mentioned, on not only the Majors TV, but 451 Detroit, where you're seeing that. Probably, I don't know if we're doing some throwing stuff in there as well. That's at 451 DET on Twitter. You can find me on Twitter, Instagram, Discord at GM Comats. Thanks also to, again, our guests joining us in there, Nick Finn, Chris Monroe. You can find Chris on Twitter. How the fuck does he says this? Twitter? Peloton. It's in the Michigan State thing, but C and the D 313 and Chris Monroe on Instagram. Niffy's, he's got it's Niffy 22 on Twitter, but there's some sort of underscore at NIFI22 on Twitter for Nick Finn and all that stuff. So peace and fun times on there too. I think it's interesting. We're already in September. Time's flying. So, for Adam in Plymouth, Garrett out here, currently at the office in Detroit, soon to be home. Thanks for checking this out. Have a great holiday weekend. And, till next time.
See ya.